First thing, I am not a tech guy, so I've been in a couple of other sessions that are super technical. I'm not that guy, but if you want to email your super technical questions, I will get them answered. But definitely if you have kind of more campaign, general type of questions or strategy questions, please bring them up through the app and during the presentation. So a little bit about my history. Born in Singapore, moved to Hong Kong. Lived in Hong Kong and then actually went to the Bay Area, around San Francisco for high school, and then eventually UCLA, graphic design major. Started a company right out of school, like a digital agency that was web-focused. That became another agency that was funded by Hans Zimmer, who's a film composer, so we're doing a lot of film marketing and stuff, and then I finally started Trigger about 12 years ago, film marketing agency that we have then kind of pivoted a couple years back to kind of focus on mixed reality. And I'll give you a little bit of reason why. Been working with Lego for 5 years. We actually have a small office out here. And lived in Yelling, if anyone's been to Yelling, for like 3 months in the dead of winter. So my wife almost divorced me, but anyways, that's a long story. First AR project was in 2009, and we have 3 patents around AR play. And this was my FaceTime call at 2:45 a.m. a couple of days ago with the jet lag. So Trigger, with the mixed reality agency, we work on kind of premier type of brands and clients, a lot of them entertainment-based. You'll recognize a few of these, I think. Our office is in West LA, and a small one in Aarhus, but the West LA one, about 10 or 11 engineers, and then the rest is kind of like creative producers, account managers, and things like that. So the fun thing about the shop is that it's very kind of like an inventor's kind of workshop. The neat thing about AR and moving into AR is like there's a lot of physical items involved. So we work for a lot of toy companies. So our office is full of Lego, and then of course all the movie posters and stuff. And then there's always new devices right now. So at any time in our shop, we'll have a couple of HoloLenses, we have a couple of daiquiri things, and then, whatever. There's just tables worth of like AR devices that people are trying and stuff. We have 90,000 hours of mixed reality development. That's a big differentiator, I think, for us. Again, because we've been doing it for so long for all these clients, and these are all paid projects, so there's a lot you learn from, instead of just kind of prototyping and demoing, there's a lot learned from actually putting it out in the wild and seeing if it breaks or not. So part of the format today is we'll go through some of these recommendations and what we learned, and I'll have some good examples of what we've done right, and then a bunch of examples of what we didn't do so right that I think is good learning as well. Showcase development means that we actually get hired by the tech companies to build something with the new code. So Vuforia, we've been their showcase agency since they were in R&D, and every major feature, we've been the one to kind of premiere it. So sometimes we would start working with the code a year in advance. And then our clients are a good spread of entertainment to the tech companies, and then kind of the major brands in between. So when we look at mixed reality, we kind of break down the services on the spectrum. So marketing and promotions is kind of what we're doing for the film companies, trying to get a lot of attention through AR. Fun experiences that create social buzz, but aren't very lasting. Product development is what we're doing with Lego and Mattel, where it's like the project can be a year and a half, 2 years long. We start with concepting, actually prototyping that then gets user tested. We've actually done 30-plus digital physical play prototypes for Lego, and these all get kid tested around the world. So there's a lot you can learn from that, when kids get fatigued, what's boring, what's not boring, what can be filled in by their kids' imagination and stuff. Location-based is what we're doing for retail companies, so something you might see in store, or we have a slide that will talk about the new Lego house, the Lego Museum. We have a full mixed reality installation in that museum. And then enterprise is what we're doing for Honda. So the enterprise stuff is using AR as an actual design tool, which is super interesting. So actually trying to solve both a budgetary problem for them, because it's really hard for them to kind of evaluate concept cars. Like each of these cars, if they're to fabricate a car for approval, it can get close to like $1 million to fabricate this thing, like interior and exterior. So with AR, can you get people to decide on design direction just from a 3D model placed in real world location? So, so our approach to mixed reality, like there's a lot of talk about technology. There's a lot of buzz around ARKit right now, but we feel like tech is only one kind of corner of it. And then there's also the content piece, and then of course location. So, and that makes like the killer user experience. So, why I think this UX issue covers so many different places we can apply mixed reality. Like on the consumer side, so you'll see these same kind of things that are factored in that we have to worry about. What is the environment? What is the content? What is the target that we're looking at? What kind of data is being passed through? What is the device, both hardware, and what is the software platform on the device? And then really importantly, what is the interaction that we're asking from the consumer? And that same thing is repeated on the enterprise side, and then also even on the location side. So those same kind of categories of things that we have to balance out when we create a mixed reality campaign. So let's start with tech. So this kind of shows both kind of hardware and software things that we've been working with in our shop in the past, let's say a quarter. If you go back a year or just over a year, that might be just Vuforia. We're just on mobile phones, single AR platform. And now things are just changing leaps and bounds. So that is something that you definitely have to keep on top of, and it can be quite difficult. But because our clients are, we go from enterprise on this end and then like movie promotion on the other end, the fact is that we'll end up touching so many different types of tech. And it's both really rewarding, like the tech guys are super excited about that, super excited about inventing and investigating, but it's also really draining and it's really expensive. So it's very hard to, we can build expertise in mixed reality as a whole, but it's hard to just focus on one, like just build our experience on HoloLens, for instance, because the very next client that we might get, the HoloLens doesn't solve their problem. So interesting challenge. So a couple of things. With all this kind of energy and buzz around ARKit, which is really cool, it's great to see both consumers and developers getting really excited about what can still happen. One of the issues that not a lot of people, at least on the consumer side, is not clear is that you actually still need an app. So ARKit is close to the OS, it'll perform better, but the actual content and the experiences all lives in an app that you still have to download. And that's not only a technical issue, and what the rest of the slides are going to show you is also there's a much bigger issue about just getting people to download apps. So as soon as you put it into an app, I think one of the recent surveys said that over 50%, I think, of US customers have not downloaded a new app in the last month. So it's how do you communicate to the user? How do you get them to want that app and then to download it? And so creating the app is just like this tip of the iceberg, and it's a much bigger challenge just to get that app on a person's phone. So one thing that we do is one thing we tell our clients is to consider an ambassador-driven experience. So that means like at an event, you can have people with tablets and stuff. So the app is installed on the ambassador's device. You can cast it up onto a screen so people coming by can see what the AR experience is. And that's a great way to introduce people to AR and get them to understand what the app is before they download it. And then the other thing, too, is consider an AR module. So this is something we just did for Star Wars. But the idea is like if you have instead of creating a dedicated AR app, which you need to drive all this traffic to, if there's already an install base, you have an app that's doing something else, can you fit the AR functionality into that? So kind of piggyback off of the user base that you've already established. Picking the right hardware and software. So again, like ARKit and AR Core is kind of just for the later phones. So if anyone's doing an actual broad-based campaign, that even though that's the most exciting buzzword right now, it may not be the right solution for you there, because it's just not going to reach enough people. And their solutions are not cross-platform yet. So what that means is you have to build it for iOS, and then you have to port it over to Android or vice versa. And then it's really interesting because it's like it's funny that there's probably a few people in the room that have been doing AR for a long time, and there's some things that are very polished about ARKit, but there's so many other features in other third-party AR platforms that do really powerful things as well. And ARKit is getting a lot of attention, but hopefully those features will start being added into that as well. So, and then one thing that's really interesting is like when you're picking the software platform or the hardware platform, licensing and all the legal side of that can be as important as the tech side. So that's kind of frustrating, but it is the reality of the space out there, especially if it's if you're not doing AR or mixed reality for promotion and you're doing it for actually product development, then there's a lot of fighting around like what is the license fee. Like if you have a product that let's say you have a toy and you put AR on it, and the AR is actually part of that play of the toy, what percentage of the price of the toy does the AR company get? And then it's like, how do you debate that? Like, what if I could play with the toy without the AR, but with the AR it's 10 times better? Is that different from if you need AR to play with the toy? So it's stuff that I think that people are still kind of working through. I don't think there's an industry standard yet, so but just something to keep in mind. And then this idea that like things are changing so fast in mixed reality right now, hardware and software, that things may change mid-development. So for us, ARKit popped up while 3 or 4 projects were still in the middle of getting built. So that can be an issue. You can either choose to rip everything out and then rebuild it and try to hit the same date or push a date. Or in our case, we're doing things where we'll still launch the original version without ARKit, and then we'll do an update after. But it's also, in some ways, it's good as well, because we had a car project where, because of, we did the project on HoloLens, and you imagine like a life-size car that you're looking at in a parking lot or whatever. Because of the field of view limitations on HoloLens, you actually have to be 60 feet away from the car to see the entire car. So all those HoloLens videos online that are just completely fake, just because like if they don't show the actual POV from the device, it's quite limited. I mean, there's amazing things about it, but the field of view thing just makes it very difficult for something that's giant size like that. And then of course now you're tracking and trying to world lock from 60 feet away, which is also challenging. Anyways, but yeah, so the point with that was like, with ARKit, we actually managed to solve some of these things that HoloLens was giving us trouble with, and we could actually restart a project that had been parked because of field of view hardware issues. So this is just showing one path of how we decide what hardware or software to use. So first question is it enterprise or consumer? Let's go consumer. Is it ambassador-driven or is it a public app? That's a big question for us, so we go down that path. Is there an existing app that we can stick the AR module in? And sometimes that's difficult even when a company has a big app, because the person that owns that app, like the department that owns that app, is probably different from the innovation group that you're working with on the AR side. So there's a lot of departments that don't work together, so that can be a tough challenge. But let's say we can't get that and it has to be a dedicated app. Is it a target-based AR experience? So target means that like I look at the GOTO conference sign and then something pops out of that. Or is it just like ARKit, and I can place it anywhere in the room. So let's say it's no target, then the choice is mass consumer or early adopter. If it's mass consumer, we would do things like user-generated targets. You can have someone use anything, find any image, like a signage or magazine or something, snap a photo of that, and that becomes the AR target. Or you can use 3 degrees of freedom, 3DOF, kind of floaty AR, Pokemon style, to try to create an experience. But if you chose early adopter, is it Apple or Android? If it's both, then you end up with ARKit and a port to ARCore. So anyways, all our projects kind of go through this, this kind of flow. The one thing that we would definitely recommend is like, typically when developers are first getting into AR, like you're so excited to build an AR that's the only thing that the app does. But there's actually a lot of other things that you can tie AR into. So think of AR as a really powerful ingredient, and that's the best way to use it. Instead of a kind of standalone thing, try to connect it with as many other useful technologies as possible. The interesting thing about AR, we just did a Spider-Man Homecoming. We had an app that was both, had kind of traditional type of content. It had Peter Parker's phone, so you actually could go on his phone and look through his voicemail and look through his text and stuff. But it also had a bunch of AR features. And we were measuring a new analytics package to see how content would compare for the consumer and how sharing would compare. And I think AR is new enough now, and it's also unique enough because it's really hard. Well, for film companies and stuff, you can literally take your IP and place it into a consumer's world. And of course, same thing for the consumer. They can pull their favorite character and bring it into their room. So of course, they're going to want to take photos and share that. And the interesting thing was, like, when we looked at we had some very simple sharing features, like emojis and stuff like that, or GIFs that you could send out. And then we had the AR path for sharing, which is quite difficult. You have to, for that one, there was no ARKit, so you actually had to create your own target, place Spidey, pose Spidey, take a photo, and then share out from there. The sharing on the AR side was as much, if not more, than on the traditional sort of content side, even though it had all those extra steps. So I think definitely take use of that. So then the other tech that can get, AR lives well with is, live data, makes it contextual. There's AI for conversation and stuff with characters. Definitely location awareness, transaction, all things to make it more practical and useful. So just some examples. Indoor and outdoor mapping. So the idea of like the AR app knowing where you are, both outside and then with VPS, which is a Google technology, like actually being inside a store and either directing you or giving you content based off of your position indoors. Real-time lighting and reflection. We're working with with this now on some projects where it's just pretty neat because like when the AR object appears or thing appears, it's actually, we have a reflection map applied to it, so it actually looks like it's at that specific location. On Honda, we've worked on projects, which I'll show you later, that actually have live telemetry from the car itself. So we're trying to do AR and VR in the rear seat of the car in a moving vehicle. So it's pulling like telemetry from the car as well as like IMU data, and we had lighthouses because it was on Vive and stuff. So merging all that stuff together. Audio fingerprint. This idea of being able to sync using audio as a way to know what you're watching, and that could be relevant to TV shows, but it's also relevant to live concerts. So imagine like you're seeing a giant concert and you want to, I don't know, dragon to fly around the stage. Like how do you sync that for everyone watching the concert? And you can do that actually through audio fingerprinting and stuff. And then AI is something that we're excited about, trying to bring more life-like reaction to our characters. So a good example on the tech side. Let's see. So this was for last year's CES as a prototype, and now we're working to commercialize this for Honda. It's a platform called Dream Drive. So at CES, there was a sled that attendees could go, but there was also a live drive version. So the live drive version, I'll show it in a little bit, has a bunch of PCs running in the back. It's actually running Vive in the car. And the challenge was basically it's taking the telemetry from the car, your movement inside the car, trying to merge that set of data together, and then have you sync your movement in the physical world with the digital world. So actually that's pretty challenging and pretty complicated. So if you imagine, like, if you're in a car and you turn right, but you're looking left, like, how do you figure out where you are in the virtual environment from those two motions, conflicting motions happening at the same time? And it also tied into Honda Pay, which is a Visa partnership. So this idea of being able to, you have all your credit card accounts set in your car, and you can actually do purchases and stuff through the car itself. And those kind of fun and games, just to show that it was both, POI navigational stuff, and as well as a kind of entertainment opportunity. So, and the reason why it's why they're doing that is because the car companies are looking at, with autonomous drive especially, all this captured time inside the car. You guys have it a little less here. Like in LA, it's freaking insane. You're just on the freeway for however many hours a day. And if that time is like captured time, how do you deliver content to those people? And if VR is going to be a big content player later, how do you deliver VR? And if you try to do VR in the backseat of the car, I don't know if you've ever tried that, it's like, you get super nauseous if it's not synced. So, yeah. I have tried. So, lessons learned. So some examples of where kind of we failed on the tech side, I think. Jollibee is a fast food company in the Philippines. We did their kind of Happy Meal AR app. It was super, when it launched, like, the video trailer for it got like millions of views, millions of likes. Like, they were super excited about it. And the app itself was actually quite a fun app. Had strong features, like you could create your own music, you could unlock different characters by going into the store, you could even take a photo of your own face and it would map it onto a 3D character that appeared in AR. So it's quite we felt a polished app. But where the actual campaign kind of broke was because of data issues in the Philippines. So the Wi-Fi wasn't in the restaurants yet, so that's one problem. So you hear about the app from TV, or you hear about the app from, let's say, online and stuff, but the app needed the Happy Meal box or whatever to work off of, which you get at the restaurant. So those two, from the point of like kind of awareness to actually getting the other piece, which is the box, there could be quite a lot of distance between that. So the ideal solution is like when you're actually in the store and you get the Happy Meal box, that's when you should be able to download the app and play that game. So it's asking a lot of consumers to say, download something in advance for your marketing campaign, right? But because of super slow speeds in the Philippines and also no Wi-Fi in the restaurants, this was kind of it could have been more successful, and we would have recommended, not going with a kind of app approach probably. Do something more on mobile web for this particular execution. So moving on to content. So let's see, there's what can pop up in AR? There's 2D content like images, UI, your text and stuff. 3D stuff like the characters, objects in the space. You can even do like full environments in AR. And then also effects, like all the particle effects that you need to make something look really cool. And then, on the audio side, we are on a project right now where it's 100 pages of content, probably 25 characters, all voice-overed, and custom music throughout the whole thing. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can push through an AR app. But something to consider is the 3D side. So 3D is kind of the biggest content piece for us. A lot of times because it looks really cool in AR, it's cool to see it in physical space, and our clients want their characters in 3D. But it can actually take a surprisingly large amount of the budget. And every project that we've started, there's always a glimmer of hope that the client will have an asset that you can actually use. And the conversations always start that way. Like, oh, yeah, we have 3D files for blah, blah, blah. And then once you actually get into the project, our head of tech has his saying is like, we have had a 0% passed on that actually working all the way. So typically, we'll get a film asset. It looks amazing, but it's a giant film asset. So you have to, how do you get that down to work on a mobile phone? Or we have CAD assets from the car companies and stuff like that. How do you make any of that AR friendly? So a lot of the times it's almost like reworking the entire 3D asset from top to bottom. So there's not only because it's not only the modeling, it's like the rigging, all the textures, how effects are applied to it, or how those effects are shown. So for instance, on Star Wars, we had to completely recreate the hologram effect that you see on film, that they're doing one way, and we have to do it in a complete different way because it's a AR hologram effect. And then the other thing that makes 3D super expensive is that because you don't want to do the person to see the same animation over and over again, you need variety, right? So that can get expensive. And then the other piece that's expensive is completeness of content. So if you imagine, like right now you see a lot of demos, let's say, hey, I can place a table in AR. Wow, that's super cool. But if that was an actual functional app for a client, you're going to realize that this manufacturer has 50 tables, right? Or however many cars this guy has, or this client has. That becomes a big workflow issue, and also a app size issue as well. So, and then the problem is if you're not complete with that. So let's say I'm going to do it for, I can make the latest line of Honda cars pop up, but I'm only going to do the Honda Civic and the Honda Accord because that's what I'm doing right now. How do you communicate that to the end user? How do you let them know the reason why this other car doesn't work or the Odyssey doesn't work? There's a lot of kind of friction from that because from the consumer's point of view, they're going to expect that if one car works, then they're all going to work. And if it doesn't, there's a lot of work trying to, almost apologize for that, right? So, and you want to head that off at the pass. You want it to be clear to consumer how to engage with AR and when it will work and when it won't work. So a good example on the kind of 3D content side. Anybody watch Walking Dead? Couple, cool. So for the new season, we did this AR app that basically you can unlock all these zombies and it's, take photos with them, fun stuff like that. The neat thing about it is actually we have a fairly frictionless way of unlocking zombies. So if you're in the US and you're watching the show, it's playing these Mountain Dew ads during the broadcast, and the app will actually listen for those ads. So when it hears the audio fingerprint, it knows you're watching the show, and when that happens, then it'll unlock a new zombie that week. So there's 20 zombies total that you get to unlock. But to show you kind of where we started from, we will get, so in Walking Dead, there are no, there are not a lot of 3D effects for all the zombies, so it's all practical stuff. So we have practical photo reference. They have done some scans, but these are, so this is a good example of a client saying, hey, we have 3D scans of the zombies. You get the 3D scan, and it's just like completely covered in all these artifacts, and it's not really, it's good for reference, but it's not, you can't just take that and then put it into your AR experience. So we'll start from this kind of reference, and then we'll kind of model and build everything from scratch on that. So some lessons learned. A couple years back on Spider-Man 2, we did a big AR app for that, and we also did a kind of online game as well. And we were super excited because we got to collaborate with the actual Spider-Man. So this is the actual stunt guy that did all the moves for Spider-Man, and I think he's stayed on as the main Spidey stunt guy since then as well. But we had him for 2 days for motion capture, and Sony paid for all of this. So for 2 days, we asked this guy to crawl around and fight people and do all these special moves that we were going to use in the AR app. So, so the crazy thing, I mean, it was really fun doing the shoot, and then afterwards, we looked at this crazy mocap data, and like it was basically, there were two big things. One was that like, this is so old that our the AR execution that we had, like Spidey was actually a fairly small character. Back then, there wasn't a lot of, the AR had to be kind of planted on top of the target. You couldn't move very far away from it. So anyways, he ended up being a small character, and all the mocap data that we got had to be hand kind of exaggerated, just so you could see it at that kind of small scale. And then the other big issue was, again, because there's so much data coming through from that mocap capture that a lot of it wasn't really usable. So it would probably have been faster if we had just videotaped him moving around and then just used that as reference than trying to work backwards from the mocap data. So location. So I think this is sometimes forgotten too, because they, this idea of like AR, just one size fits all, use it anywhere. But collision and occlusion really break believability. So a lot of the demos that you're seeing online, if you see someone doing AR in the middle of a field or in like a park or something like that, it's the chances of you actually using it that way is pretty minimal. So so if you imagine you take that same experience and you map it to you're sitting in the office, you're on a bus or whatever, it'll instantly break because your characters will be overlapping physical environment. The available space issue, like what I was talking about on the car side, like that idea of like, oh, it's super cool let's do AR in a car dealership, have things show up. But it turns out, how far do you have to be away from the car? How much in the showroom? How much space do you have between the cars that a person can fit in and step back and see? All that has to kind of be figured out. And then indoor versus outdoor, there's a whole bunch of lighting conditions that change because of that. We've done stuff in theme parks where the lighting will change a lot throughout the day, because also at night all these lights come on and that do all these different things. So how do you make something recognizable through a whole 16-hour cycle for a place like that? And then we've even had issues with magnetic interference and stuff like that, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But some clients might choose something like even specific down to table size. Like we did a big project for McDonald's, had to work on all their tables. So we actually had to get table sizes from around the world and build the game to whatever spec that minimum table size was, which was an interesting challenge, yeah. So some of the locations that we've had to kind of tailor an experience to. But I think once you actually have it dialed in and tailored into that experience, it's much more powerful, versus just trying to make it that it'll fit anywhere. So a couple of examples on the location side. I just want to show this first is, so when we first started working with AR and on mobile device, like us being Star Wars fans, one of the first things we did was a Star Wars demo. So this is we had an asset from a game that we're doing for Lucasfilm. It was like an online Flash game. and we made them kind of walk around the poster box and stuff in AR. So this is 2012, and we basically pitched that every 6 months to Lucasfilm for 5 years or something like that, and we finally got it into the Star Wars app. So we did it for Force Awakens. We did 4 characters in the official Star Wars app for that, and then for the Last Jedi, it's a much bigger campaign. So this campaign is 20,000 retail locations. So for Force Friday, it's when the toys first came available to the public. So if you imagine the logistics of getting signage into 20,000 stores around the world in different languages, and then those were all AR targets. So I'll show you that.
It's a trap!
Anyways, there's 15 total characters. There was like, basically you'd go back into the retail location, and for that weekend, every single day it would give new characters, so you couldn't see them all on the first day. So it's basically driving parents and kids back in to buy more stuff. Another tip is, again, like the physical world and augmenting the physical world is a lot, for me, it's a lot more interesting than just placing something into an empty space. So this idea of like 3D recognition, so we've done things where you can look at a toy and then the Lego characters are, walking on top of the boat or whatever, or the shark is swimming around it. Like it's locked onto a physical object. There's a lot of magic in that. And then the next step where that's all going to go is kind of machine learning, visual identity stuff. So instead of, right now we have to, program into the app. We take the CAD model for, let's say, a Lego toy, and it will now be recognizable by the app itself, but we had to ingest that CAD model first. In the future, I don't know how near future, but with machine learning, you hold it up, it will recognize that it is a Lego toy, it will recognize that it's that theme or whatever, and then the right content will appear. So that's quite an exciting leap, I think. So in terms of kind of physical objects, this is kind of at a big scale. So for Star Wars, the other part of this campaign was we call it landmark AR, but basically on that weekend, if you're within, I think it was a 1.5 mile radius of these 20 world landmarks, we'd actually put an AR Star Destroyer at the proper scale in the sky and stuff. But I think like that's, again, like the landmark was important because it gave you that sense of scale. We could have set it up so that you could just point it at the sky anywhere and see a Star Destroyer, but there was more of an event-driven push through this. And then all of that, there's so much consumer messaging that you need to do to, again, drive the right kind of usage in the app. It has to be consistent across all this kind of media. So before a person downloads, you're trying to explain why they should download this app, how to download it and where to play with it. And then after download, the problem is like no one ever reads the instructions. So and that's a big challenge on AR, right? Because sometimes can be quite a few steps. So the ways around that is put a lot of videos on YouTube showing the right way to do it, embed videos walking people through it, or we are doing a lot more projects that have some sort of, and this is better for a product that has some sort of guided play. So the UI and the UX will actually walk them through as they go the first time through the app. And And here's an example from Force Friday, just to show, from the social banners to print ads to the final standees. And then good lesson learned in terms of location. We did this for the Eiffel Tower at the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas. So it was an iPad experience that when you went up into the Eiffel Tower, you got all this content pushed to you along the way. So it was pretty complex. It was like the first time us and the client were using beacons. So as you're waiting in line and moving towards it, using beacons, it would tell you, it would start pushing content to you. There was AR kind of targets along the way, so you could scan stuff and get more info and more experiences as you're kind of going up this Eiffel Tower experience. And then at the very end, when you're at the top, we were going to give a very functional view of the Las Vegas Strip. So you could look around everywhere, and all this pop-up information about, the name of the casino, it was going to be dynamic, so like what were the offers that were happening at all these kind of partner casinos and locations and stuff. So on a project like that, everything was, we were really focused on the AR and beacon side of things, because that's where we felt the risk was on the development side. That's where it could go wrong the most. And then the crazy thing was the compass didn't work at the top of the Eiffel Tower, because it's like this Faraday cage because of how it's built and stuff. So we basically had to, halfway through the thing, with some negotiation with the client, we had to rework what was going to happen at the top. So it became basically just a 360 view of actual Paris, and then that way it didn't actually have to lock to any position. Really, you're just kind of you don't know you're looking north versus south or whatever. So it could be a very loose approximation as you turned around. So quickly to finish it off. So on the UX side, no one wants a one-trick pony. Make sure it's something that's worth downloading. How can it be fun in the first minute, the first hour, the first week? And that's usually depth of content, depth of experience. And I think the example that we're really proud of is actually at the Lego Museum that just opened last week. I was just there a couple days ago. We did this thing called the fish tank, or fish designer. So basically, super elegant. You go up, you build your own fish. There was those scanners, I don't know if you saw in the photo, on the side of each tank, but you basically place the fish into the scanner, and it digitizes the fish. You put an eyeball on it, and then a mouth that indicates both personality and then direction, and then it gets sucked into this digital tank, and it comes alive. And basically, you can have like 300 user-created fish in this tank. And there's all this animation that happens on a cycle, like every minute or so, something big will happen, like they'll feed the fish, and then all the fish react to that. So this is a super simple scanning process, so we wanted this magic moment. So why I like this user experience is like, for the kids, they're doing everything that they want to do. You don't want to build a Lego fish on an iPad. I want to build it out of bricks, And then the scanning moment is like just super short and sweet, like this magic moment when you actually see it digitized. And on the scanner itself, it actually fills with water before it gets sucked into the tube, which is really cool. And then on the downside of things, fatigue is a big issue. So there's a lot of talk about like, hey, you can play a game pointing at an empty table. Like we've done a lot of tests with that stuff, that kind of play in the past. Like it is really fatiguing to hold up a phone in AR for that long, especially for younger players. And if you're doing shopping or whatever, like you might only have one hand, so any kind of landscape versus portrait, you should probably go portrait, where you place the buttons and all that sort of stuff matter. But it also affects hardware. So AR is using open camera. It gets super hot. So you have like heat issues, but also like battery drain issues. So lesson learned from that. A downside, we worked with Weta Workshop for many years actually trying to make this board game product. So Weta is from New Zealand. They've Lord of the Rings fame, an awesome team, great designers. So they were designing a physical game. We were trying to do an AR digital companion to it at the same time. Basically, the board game's going to launch just as a physical version. We actually user tested in all these game conferences. Everyone loved all the features that we were trying to do in AR, because you could see the battles, you could manage the game, it could give you the rules. But the thing that we couldn't solve was, like, if you have 4 players and the average play time for these board games was, a short game was 50 minutes. So long games were like, 2 hours. Like, you could not get 4 people to have their phones charged for, like, for that gameplay. Like, and then as soon as one person breaks and they've lost it, then it's broken for the entire group. So just something to consider. And then on a final note, you can't always plan for everything, but there's still, like, pleasant surprises and stuff. So this was just something that our client had sent to show us, was like, at one point during the opening, someone made a flag instead of making a fish. And then everyone afterwards started copying that flag. And no one had planned for that, right? Like, no one, but it was really cool. Like, it's cool that those experiences, those things can still happen randomly. So anyways, thank you.
So thank you very much, Jason. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. I have some questions from the app. So there's a question on the status or your opinion on Magic Leap. Is it vaporware, or is it too complex or expensive to develop for?
Yeah,
maybe you can quickly explain what Magic Leap is.
So Magic Leap is a mixed reality company out of Florida. They have it's supposedly using light field technology, which is basically the rays of light beam straight into your eyeball to see the AR appear, and it requires it's a see-through headset. And I think why people ask, like, is it vaporware, is that they got a ton of funding and everyone's been waiting for them to actually release something. So we're all hoping that they're pretty close. I don't think it's going to be vaporware, but I also think that, like, from what we've seen working on HoloLens and other kind of hardware, there are some things that are physically very difficult to I mean, just out of physics, you can't beat or can't work around that much. So field of view is an issue, and then also with see-through, just brightness. Having it work outside is an issue as well. So I think that when Magic Leap comes around, it'll be amazing, but it's still going to run into those same pitfalls that people have. So there'll be conditions like inside and stuff where it'll look amazing, but as soon as you take it to certain places, it'll start to break too. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. And I think we have time for one last question. What to do when the compass doesn't work? It seems you had that experience in the Eiffel Tower app. Is it okay to, for example, let the users manually calibrate? What's your thought about that?
You can. I mean, we just went with a different content solution entirely. We have done stuff with calibration. I think calibration is a good solution if it's kind of baked into the experience itself. So we were working on a big concert experience where we had time for the user to find themselves in the seat before the show started. They could look on stage and calibrate the AR at that moment, and then the device would remember where the position of the stage was throughout the rest of the concert, and then still put the AR in roughly the right spot because of that. But even to do that, there was a lot of coordination with the show director and what signage has to be on stage and all that sort of stuff. So relying on the consumer to do it right is kind of, yeah. It's a bit iffy, so yeah, try to work around that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we're out of time. Thank you, Jason. And remember to vote, please.